everyone, and welcome back to the RedSeaPodcast. This is episode 79. And sadly, and a bit unexpectedly, the second week in a row where the football episode, of course, I missed the basketball one because I was sick. Those will return to normal at the end of this week. The football episode is a bit bittersweet again, but thankfully I have Gav with me. How are you, man?
As good as I can be. Like you said, it's a little bit of a letdown today after the result. I think we were both hoping we could potentially be celebrating the 48th title, but that'll have to wait till next week at least.
Hopefully it's until next week, and hopefully we won't have to wait and make it even more difficult than it honestly has to be on ourselves because right now the position we're at, it's only us that can make it difficult on ourselves. But yeah, as you told me, let's keep an eye on the score on the Panathinaikos side game. As you told me right before we started, Panathinaikos scored, so probably that's about the same.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really have too much of an impact on us. Regardless of the result tonight, even if Ike win, we still win the title next week with a victory. So this, I believe, if Panathinaikos win, a draw next week is good enough, so long as Panathinaikos don't also win, because then technically they would be able to catch us. So we would hope for a draw between Panathinaikos and Paok, but we'll see. I mean, either way, next week we just need a win. As I'm sure we'll talk about here shortly, it's also about the momentum that this team is on. Um, Today we came out very flat, lacking the intensity, lacking the drive that we needed to go and win this match. And we really need to reverse that because we still are involved in two competitions, and really we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we end up falling short of where we could have been.
It's not unnecessarily relaxed mindset that you said. Perhaps some players, I'm not gonna put everyone in the same bucket, but some players perhaps thought that stuff was already over, which a sizable advantage almost never means that the competition is over, especially in football, because as we saw, for example, with a team like Paok, they hadn't won a derby all season, and now they're 2 for 2 in the playoffs. Any form can be overturned, whether that's positive or negative. So, as you said, and as we'll of course talk about, we need to see out the game calmly. We need to play like we did against Panathinaikos, to say the example that's the most recent, and we will celebrate the title like we deserve and at our home. And we honestly deserve this title. I think there is no underestimation in saying that we fought very hard. We've been without a league for 3 years now. It still feels insane to say that Olympiacos hasn't won any titles in Greece, whether that's the league or the cup, in 3 years. Especially the cup. I feel like our last cup was ages ago.
That was Solakis coming in and
Was
making
it?
his, was that not his, he, I think that was his debut or maybe his second game for us, in 2020, where he's 17 and kept a clean sheet in the final. Um, yeah, I mean, it has been something we deserved, and I think that's what makes today so disappointing. Just as I'm saying this, Panathinaikos have scored a third goal, so they will be defeating Ike tonight. So that again, like we said earlier, doesn't really change our calculus next week too much, but we will be maintaining our 10-point lead at the top of the league. So positives where we can find them.
It's a
Um,
positive and it's a shame as well because we could be champion right now.
yeah, I mean, building on that point, which is what I was just about to go into before I saw that. That's I think that's what makes today more disappointing is the fact that we have so thoroughly deserved we deserve to be celebrating as champions right now. But today we let ourselves down, and that's the biggest thing. Um, th- that to me is what just makes it sting a little more. It's not that the other team played so well, because Paok were okay, but they weren't anything fantastic. It's not that we got screwed by the ref. We just let ourselves down, and you just don't ever want to be able to say that about your team. But yeah, I mean, hopefully looking at this and seeing that disappointment of, hey, if we would have just taken care of business in that first 15 minutes against Pauk, we would be champions right now. Even a draw today. Probably no, that wouldn't have mathematically done it, but we get a better result. We could very well be champions right now, like we deserve. So I think that's just what we need to look at. I hope that's what Jose Luis Mendilibar is imparting on the team. I hope that they realize that we're still a game away, and you can't play with your food, because the longer this goes on, right? If we, God forbid, lose next week, we then have a 2-week gap between games because of Pascal, obviously. You don't want to be getting to a point where there's actually pressure on you again. We just need to take care of business and solidify our place as champions next week.
Hadn't even thought about the gap that's after the Ike game. Yeah, it's exactly like you said. We can't play with our phone because that usually bites teams in the ass, and it's way too unnecessary of a pressure point for us to not just completely see it out next week. And I'm sure that not only the team but the fans will make sure everything goes well next week, because it is always an added advantage to play as Picaresca catches.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the positives that you could take from today's match is that, we played as poorly as we did for large portions of this match. Even in the second half where we were better, it was very sloppy. I mean, there were chances we didn't finish off. Um, our attack was lackadaisical at best sometimes, and we still only lost 2-1 at one of the toughest places to play in Greece. So, if there is any silver lining to the result, I think that would have to be it. That even at our worst, we can still get a competitive result. And like Dennis said, as I'm sure he'll be back here momentarily, next week is a big advantage for us being at the Kaniskakis, a place where, last time we hosted Ike, we defeated them 6-0. You obviously would hope for a similar result. And then obviously, coming off of this Panathinaikos match that is just wrapping up for Ike, they're also not coming in with a great amount of momentum. They lost last week at home to Paok 3-2. So if anybody's doing worse than Olympiacos right now in terms of short-term form, it is definitely Ike. So I think it's kind of fortunate for us that the schedule shapes out that way. But we just need to see a better approach from the beginning. I think the issue today is we just came out looking very flat. Talking to some people on Twitter, Tristan, I don't know if he follows the show or not, but one of the things he mentioned to me was that it seemed like we came in expecting Pauk to just be, paying us honors as the presumptive champions of Greece, and not a team that was playing to get into second spot, which they were. And that really, we paid for it. We conceded 2 very cheap goals in the first, what was it, 10, 11 minutes. And I think that's just the most disappointing part is, Pauk, as solid as they weren't perfect. That definitely wasn't a match where you look at it, at their performance, and say they just deserve to win. I think they took advantage of obviously our shortcomings, and the poor approach that we brought to the match early on. But I mean, outside of that, they gave us our chances to come back into it. The second half, obviously, Olympiacos was much better, despite the fact that our final third, finishing off chances when we would create something for ourselves was incredibly poor. But they also gave us the opportunity with the red card. Our good friend Mari Camara, who scored the second goal. You know, shamefully that he wasn't marked from 2 yards out, but he did score the goal. He gave us a bit of a lifeline at the end with a very, you know, very stupid foul that he did not need to make. And we unfortunately weren't able to take advantage of that. So I think when you look at today's match, it's really more of a story of Olympiacos beating ourselves than Paok doing anything extraordinary to earn 3 points, which again, I'm not going to dispute they deserved because of our performance. But that's just the part that I think makes it frustrating for me. But it can also be a slight silver lining going into next week. Are you back, Ben? Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. I got a call. It thankfully wasn't a technical thing,
Got it.
and thankfully I was gone for like 3 minutes. I I heard everything you said, but even if I didn't, the last line that you said feel like sums everything up as perfectly as possible because it is a story of us just beating ourselves up for no reason. I'd argue that yeah, it was a lackluster first half, but even if you take the first 20 minutes, that's the game done, sadly. Uh, and as you started to more or less go into it, I want to analyze that a bit more. That it sadly, which is a rare case, it sadly all more or less begins from the lineup today because a setup was attempted and it didn't work out in the slightest, sadly.
No, I mean, I think I understand where Mentally was coming from. I think especially with some of the players that we had out, um, putting on Yaremchuk and Kabi, that's not a lineup that we've seen together very much this season. And I think being where we're at, it is a pretty low risk place to try something because we did have a 10 point lead at the top of the league. Um, but I just think that we lacked a lot in the middle and on the wings as well. I think starting three center backs probably is not something that we'll ever see Mendilibar do again. I thought that on both goals, really, we just looked very caught out. The first goal, um, obviously Karamo, you can argue there's potentially a foul there with him getting nudged. I would say I don't think that's a foul. I think that's just a striker being physical and creating space. And Biancon was caught out of position, and then it's like, okay, you have Costinha and Pirola left to cover a lot of ground. We know how quick Costinha is, but Pirola wasn't able to make up that space where possibly a Francisco Ortega or a Bruno possibly could have. I think that in that instance we lacked some pace to be able to close that down. So I think that came into part of it when both of your center backs get taken out of the play. But obviously, I think there was some positioning issues there as well. And then on the second goal, I mean, I think that goes on everybody. I don't know how you leave any player, even a bum like Mari Camara. I don't know how you leave them unmarked from 2 yards out. I mean, obviously, we talked about it a little. Potentially, Solakis does better on that. I'm always hesitant to blame a goalkeeper when a shot comes from that close and he's just unmarked. So I think it really just seemed like you said, in that first 20 minutes, especially the first 15 minutes when both the goals came, it just seemed like we were completely turned off, um, which is very uncharacteristic since Medellín has taken over, because that's arguably been our strongest attribute, is the fact that our mentality is usually so locked in, and it wasn't like that today. So you know, it's frustrating. I don't fault Mendilibar for trying to change the lineup, but like you said, I mean, I feel like the back line was a problem, especially early on, and you know, the midfield and the wingers. I thought I think having Garcia and Eze together when you don't have that 10 in front of them to really help build up and also come back and support them. You know, both of those guys are not going to be very quick and covering a lot of space. And I think you saw it today, especially with Kotsanatarias. He was really able to get whatever he wanted. And even to a lesser effect, Ajdoyev coming out of midfield and Mari Kamara getting a goal. Um, there just wasn't a lot of resistance, and I think part of that comes from them just being outnumbered in the middle. And obviously, El Gabi and Yaremchuk aren't going to be coming back as much as your two strikers. So I think going forward, that's not something we should see, barring major injury issues. I think we would have been better off starting Muzakitis at that 10, or even just giving a third center midfielder. I think the biggest issue for us is we were getting overrun, and then you have a back line that lacks a lot of the pace and athleticism you usually have if you had two fullbacks as compared to three center backs. So that's kind of my take on all of it. I'm sure you have some of your own thoughts.
I mean, as you said, I'll focus on your latter points mostly because, in my opinion, the Ritabin Yarmchuk duo isn't something that necessarily troubled me today. The the only lackluster part we have with having those two together is exactly what you pointed out, that neither of them runs back for cover. That's why it, for me, has to be one of them with Kostulas when Kostulas is healthy. But I really get why uh, both of them started. What I didn't get, and it's the thing I pointed out to you immediately, and I think you just pointed out now, is why Pirola started left back. Like, okay, I can stand to hear the opinion that maybe Bruno can't play a full 90 yet, but even if that's the case, this may be extremely hindsight, like extremely hindsight. But you start Bruno and then you sub him off for someone else. For me, that's always what the case should be with players that can't really get a full 90. Same that's been happening with Yaremchuk for a majority of the season. And yeah, the first goal, for me, the foul call, especially watching the play back because I didn't even see that where the complaints were. For me, that's too soft to be given. I wouldn't call for it if it was in our favor, and that's usually the criteria where I hold plays like that. So I'm not gonna call for it now. So yeah, it was just a horrible throw ball on our end with both centre backs being completely out of position. And even if it was a foul, maybe this will sound a bit delusional, but it's not the foul that's stopping you from having six players, I'm pretty sure it was, to stop one pass going through and then Costadellas getting into a position that Zolakis could do nothing about. And for the second goal, I did start off by blaming Zolakis, but that more or less was, you know more than anyone that, and everyone listening knows more than anybody, that I want to credit goalkeepers more than any position on the field because I think that that position deserves a lot more respect than it gets. But you can't get megged by a header, even if it's from like 2 meters in front of you. But of course, the main fault doesn't go to Julanchis, it goes to whoever was supposed to be marking Mati. And as I told you, without being extremely sure, watching it back again, I'm pretty sure it was supposed to be Piancon, which brings me to my next point. Both of Carmo and Biancon have been, as much as I love Biancon, they've been out of the four, the two most inconsistent for me. Carmo has been straight up bad, or like he doesn't give a flying fuck about being here. And especially for Carmo, Biancon, of course, isn't the quality of player, isn't the level of player that Carmo is. But Biancon has put in better performances because of the passion that he gives for this team. And some of the performances that you can point out of Julian Biancon have been way better than the majority of games that Carmo has had. But putting those two together is always a risk. And it doesn't only point out the thing that I said, that in hindsight, I would have probably put on Bruno, Pirola, and Biancon, and then subbed off Biancon for Carmo. That's probably what I would have done. But it also shows how horribly we're missing Panos Retsos. Like
Yeah.
that player has been so underappreciated and it shows now more than ever.
Well, I think you saw it today. It really felt like we were missing a leader at the back. Even with, Rodine in the game, he's playing further up the pitch, right? So, I mean, he's obviously not going to be as involved or connected with the back line. So when you don't have Rodine in the back, when you don't have Retsos in the back, who is the leader? It's definitely not Carmo. I don't think you can look at a guy like Pirola, who's 21, 22. He shouldn't be marshaling the back line. You know, and then Biancon and Costinha, I mean, as good as they've been for us this season, both of them are relatively new to Olympiacos. Obviously, Costinha this season, Biancon came, latter half of last season. Um, you didn't really have that cohesion, and I think part of that as well is just the fact that they haven't played as much together, but not having a leader, not having a glue guy to really keep them together. I think you saw the impacts of that, and like you said, I think the majority of the criticism for the backline should go on Carmo and Biancon. I don't necessarily blame Pirola or Costinha for that first goal or even really the second, because they're not the ones who are supposed to be covering the entire middle of the pitch, right? I mean, that's just not where they're supposed to be. And I don't think outside of that either of them were poor. Um, but it was disconnected. It was disjointed, and that's what leads to you being so disorganized and giving up two very very cheap goals that really shouldn't happen.
I'd argue that uh, Pirola, of course, I agree with you that he shouldn't have to be that leader in the back line. But I'd argue that that's what he was today, and that's what one of his natural talents and traits is, as we see in the Italian under 21s team as well, and soon to be in the men's team as he's expected to be called up. And definitely neither of Julian and Carmo as a standalone player were poor, but the chemistry, the lack of the chemistry that was so blatant today made both of their performances, especially for Biancon, who's put in some of his career best this season, arguably the worst of the season.
Oh, I think it's his worst for Olympiacos. I mean, uh, you said that you think he's been inconsistent. I would probably disagree with you a little bit there. Maybe that could just be me with some bias. I know you do as well, but I
I
love Julian
said
Biancon.
I said that he's been inconsistent compared to Pirola and Trezos, not in
Yeah,
general.
okay, that's fair. I mean, I would agree with you. That's definitely the worst that we've seen from him, because, like you said, he normally just plays with so much passion that it seems to lift up the rest of his game. Because we can both agree that he's definitely not our most talented defender. He's probably our least talented as far as pure talent, but he plays with such a great mentality. And like you said, I do think there was a point there that individually neither of them were incredibly poor, but together, I mean, it's so important to have a partnership, especially in center back, that works, right? anywhere else in the pitch, right? You can talk about, your midfielders or your fullbacks or your wingers, like being able to work in tandem. If your center backs aren't working together, it could not matter less. You could put, you know, prime Barcelona out there with Biancone and Carmon at center back, and they would still lose to this Paok team, right? So it goes back to the lineup being experimental, and I'm not necessarily mad that we did it, but it definitely can't happen again. And I believe he'll learn from that lesson, Mendilibar. I think he's been very good about not continuously trying with things that don't work, like we've seen with past managers, especially Pedro Martins. I think he's very aware. Um, so I'm not anticipating that this should be a continuous issue, but that's always going to kill you.
Speaking of the fucking unspeakable, I talked about it with you, and I said it few shows ago. If this man shows up as a Nike manager in July, I'll be laughing my fucking ass off. I said it before, and I'll say it again.
He'll probably first thing he does is he'll put a 10 million euro offer in for Kamara from Pauk, his favorite player.
And Camara suddenly turns into Lazarus, but Christ above. As you said with the center backs, it just starts a chain reaction of messing up the entire team because as we saw, messes up Solakis, the fullbacks have to do more defensively, which brings the wingers back, and then it's a whole domino that leads to the loss that we saw and any loss. Another thing though that for me has been the main, maybe the only thing that Mendilibar consistently just tries. And I think that you did mention on those like 3 4 minutes that I was answering the call is that Garcia and Ese have never worked well together. It needs to be one or the other with Mozakitis next to them and a proper 10 up top. And I feel like aside the whole centre back situation, which was our biggest problem today, the thing that just killed the midfield battle and allowed Osdoev, Camara, and especially Costadillas such freedom, and perhaps that messed up the centre backs a bit as well, was that Ese and Garcia, that are two of the slower type of players, of the more classic defensive midfielder or box to box type of players for Danny and Ese accordingly. They had to cover both the midfield and the spaces that the fullbacks left open, which is impossible as we saw. So yeah, that is the main lesson that needs to be learned, in my opinion, on the delivery side, and perhaps the only, if not like one of the two quote unquote complaints that I personally have from him throughout the season.
I don't understand. Obviously, he started Chiquinho out on the left. I don't understand why he didn't start Palma or someone like that and start Chiquinho next to probably Edse. I mean, I think that would have done a lot better for us. Um, like you said, I mean, that I think further compounded the center back issue because there was no midfield. They were completely overrun. I think it's just a numbers issue, right? When you have three in the middle for Paok and two in the middle for Olympiacos, it doesn't matter. You could have, I mean, even if we play Chiquinho next to it, say I don't think it would have made that much of a difference because two guys, three guys, right? They're going to overrun, um, relatively easily if you don't have that third player coming back from, the middle. And obviously, like we mentioned, Yaremchuk and Kabi, and I don't necessarily blame them for that. That's not their game. That's not their position. So you really had a numbers issue in the middle, and that compounds obviously a center back tandem that has little to no chemistry. Um, So I mean, I think that like you said, some of his midfield selections at times can be a little suspect. I think today he could have played it better. Um, Potentially moving Chiquinho to the middle. I'm not sure why he wouldn't start Palma. We saw that against Ike in the big victory, and Palma started, and I believe he played most of the match. I don't think fitness is an issue there. So I don't know why he wouldn't have gone with that decision, but that could potentially lead into the next point of talking about the wingers today when they did come on. Um, Probably being more frustrating than who we had on before that. um, I think I saw Costas Lianos um, make a point about this. This match shows us for next season going into the Champions League, which we should be entering automatically if and when we win the league. We desperately, desperately, desperately need two wingers who can play at that level. I obviously think we keep Gelson. I think we could potentially keep Luis
Do
Palma.
we?
I think you need depth. I mean, those are two guys who I think can play for you in the league, right? Especially at the beginning of the season when we're playing everybody. Um, but we do need two top line guys who can come in and really play at that elite level. I think when you look at last season versus this season, right? Down the stretch last year, our wingers were Daniel Podense and Costas Fortunis. It's like night and day. I mean, that's what you need if you really want to compete in Europe. You need two guys of that quality and that level that are going to be able to consistently put pressure on your opponent. Luis Palma and Gelson Martins or Rodine on the wing doesn't work. I mean, you saw today our entire offensive strategy was let's cross the ball into the wind to nobody. Sky it over El Kabi and Yaremchuk every single time and kick it to your other winger who's going to kick it right back. It's like we just there was no pressure from the outside, so Paok were able to sit in and play bunker ball, especially towards the end when they were down to 10, and just cram everyone in the middle because they know the ball's not even going to make it there. So what's the point? Like I think that was, despite the second half being much better, um, that was incredibly frustrating. And I think it does show that we desperately this summer will need to make some serious squad upgrades, especially on the wings, because that's just not going to be good enough.
I also feel like to your point about crossing, I also feel like we had like 5, 6 offsides in the first 35 minutes alone. At least it really felt like that. Now to the point of uh, the wingers, especially before I get into a rant I have noted down, the rant that I've gone on countless times, but I will never get tired of it. I don't think we keep both. I It's one or the other, and I'll tell you why I'm thinking that it's one or the other. Because you need to cover you for the highest of high levels that is, of course, to go them Champions League. You need two wingers on either side there. But if you're thinking about the league alone and the depth that you need, I keep Palma. And again, as I've said many times before, the way that people hate on Luis Palma, I feel like it's so planned and so unnecessary because while yes, Palma can sometimes be frustrating for sure, but it's a player that wants to stay here. It's a player that can help negotiate. Would I give 4 million for him? No, but if there is help from the player side to negotiate the price to like 2.5 to maybe 2 even, because the player does want to stay here, the player does not want to go back to Celtic, I would gladly give those, because we can easily get those for the Selson. I believe that we can get like 3-4 million for Zelson easily,
I
whether
mean,
that's Europe, whether that's
depending on where
Saudi.
he's going, if he's going to Saudi, we could probably get 6 or 7 for him. I mean, he, I think I agree with you because I think there is probably more value upside for Gelson. And the other point that I would make that you and I have also talked about, Gelson's availability is a major, major issue. We cannot have this guy be out every other game like he has been this season. I mean, I was shocked that he played today. Um,
Same.
it's not a problem that you have with Luis Palma. Um, and I mean, if you do only keep one of them, that gives you the opportunity to integrate guys like Papacanelos, potentially Benemonidis next season. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But you know, regardless, neither of those guys, if we're having to start either of them in the Champions League, forget about it. I mean, it's going to be a bad campaign. We're not going to be able to compete for the knockouts because as good as our defense might be, you saw it in the Europa League this season. We only scored, what was it, 9 goals or 7, whatever it was. Offensive, we aren't able to put pressure on other teams. So it doesn't matter if our guys at the back are only conceding, a goal every other game. You could be losing both of those games, or a loss and a draw, and that's just not good enough. So uh, I definitely do think that we are going to need to invest in the attack this coming summer, assuming that we can hold on to the majority of our depth in defense. And I would hope and assume that our only departure would be Carmo and maybe Pirola. But I mean, I guess it'll just depend. But we do need to strike that balance more, and I think we saw it again today. That was a big issue.
The point that I was gonna make is the point you covered off perfectly. Is that if you wanna keep Zelson for depth reasons, you basically are risking not having depth every other game, like you said, because it's not only his injuries, it's the fact that up until he adapts to what Medilibar wants him to do again, he's injured again. That's what this season has felt like. So it's much better to get, in my opinion at least, many people can easily disagree. It's much better, in my opinion, to get as much money as we can for Zelson, spend some of it to get Palma, and have Papacanelos or Pneumonides on standby and have them play you, if not every league game, aside the derby. There is
Yeah,
no reason in my mind why at least one of the two, because it's being heard that Papaganellos will probably go out on loan next season. There is no reason that Pneumonides, who is a right winger, cannot play every game. At worst case scenario, part the derbies. Speaking of uh, games in general and the UCL, if the switch up on some players by people that were praising said players is so bad with losses against Paok that may not even affect a single fucking thing. I don't even want to imagine how bad it will get next season fan base wise. I really don't want to imagine the levels that the toxicity will get to and the levels that the fucking misery will get to, because I may not be pointing out the comments in football, but I fucking see them. And there is a funny announcement that I haven't told you about, that I'm working with a close person to the show in making a special type of video for the end of the season with certain people's comments for basketball. So that will be the funniest fucking thing going up on every platform of this channel. And I may very well negotiate making one for football as well, because some of you are so, so unbearable.
I can't wait till next season when we lose 2-1 at the Bernabeu, and we're hearing about how Olympiacos is the worst team on the planet and Mendilibar should be sacked and all this. I mean, like I was saying earlier, it says a lot about our level and how far this team has come in like 18 months that we're really upset and disappointed about a 2-1 loss at Tumba where we played horribly. I mean, 2 years ago, that would be a 4 or 5-0 loss, right? I mean, the fact that we can play that bad and still only lose by a goal in a very tough environment, I think that does say a lot. So, like you said, and like you've been saying, I think it's really important to keep that like big picture perspective, right? Because we should know better than anybody. It could always be way worse than this. Um, so, as frustrating as it might be, there's no need for all of that extra.
2 years ago, we did concede four at the Karaiskakis. The example is right there. Two
Yeah.
years ago, we were also conceding five in Europe.
I mean, that was
Combined,
last season. That was last season.
Freiburg was last season.
That was
My bad.
last season. Like that's how I mean no, I mean that's how close it
See?
was. Like it proves our point.
My stupidity proved our point, like usual. The Maccabi game was 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
uh
The Haifa game.
yes, that was 23. So that was 2 years
Yeah,
ago.
I'm not forgetting the game where I wasn't there. But yeah, it proves the point that the last season we lost 5-0 to Freiburg, was it, right?
Hmm.
Plus 5-0 to Freiburg, and then went on and won the Conference League. There is always a bigger picture. I'm just afraid that, thankfully, as someone said, it may be a very miserable punch, but it's a minority. But I'm afraid that that minority will never have the logic that's needed to go ahead and see that bigger picture. Who am I to judge that?
I mean, at the end of the day, I think the overarching point should be, despite how poorly we played, it really wasn't a setback for us. Fortunately, our friends Panathinaikos did us a favor tonight. Probably the last time we'll ever be able to say that. Um, Still on top of the league by 10 points. We are still far and away the best team in Greece. We just need to finish the job next week. It's that simple. Go into next week, beat Ike at the Kariskakis, and then you can spend the next 2 games, 3 games preparing for the cup. You can potentially, like I mentioned privately to you, potentially start integrating some of these youth players. See how Papacanelos can do in a true Super League match. Maybe see how Panathinaikos can do in a true Super League match. You know, you give yourself a lot of opportunity there if you do take care of business early. And it allows certain players like a Zelson Martins who cannot play week in, week out to bubble wrap himself until the final against Dolphy. So, I mean, it's at the end of the day, there's really no reason for a major overreaction in this game. You can get your curses out now and vent your frustration, but nothing changed for us today. We are still right where we were this morning, 10 points on top of the league, 1 win away from the title.
I mean, the list is endless with names that you can integrate if you do end and win the league next week. It's Papacanelos, especially with now Europe not being a factor. You can arguably bring whoever you want up, but it's Papacanelos, it's Pneummonidis, it's Alafakis that almost played in the cup, and I'm so sad that he didn't. It's Lolis that's already gotten his debut, and it's so many more. Uh, Not really necessary to speak on any specific performances today because there is not really much to say about most, but I do want to focus on two. And I do want to start with one question. Is Bruno now our starting left back?
I don't see why not. Um, from what I've seen from him, it does not seem like fitness is an issue. I don't see any reason why we can't play him a full 90 or at least 65 or 70. Um, I don't think it's Pirlo's strength. He can cover there, but it's not his strength. That is not his primary position. Ortega's been incredibly inconsistent lately. So I also caution against really defaulting to him. I would like to see Bruno get a chance. I think next week would be a good opportunity for it. And hey, we will have opportunities regardless of whether we win the league next week or the week after or whatever. We should have some dead rubber games. Doesn't matter how poorly we play this out. Yeah, I think this is the time now to try to start integrating players like that who are, obviously he's going to be a first teamer. He's not one of these youth guys. Give him a chance. At some point, we have to. When Ortega isn't playing well, when Pirola has shown that it's not his best spot, why would you not give him the opportunity to stake claim? He's been nothing but positive, in my opinion, since he has come into the fold as obviously a depth option. Give him a shot. I think next week would be my pick to start him at left back.
Maybe a stretch, but I do not. I at least can't recall a left back that's been so physical yet so fast.
I mean,
In
he's
the last,
6 feet tall, is he not?
he's six or he may even be 6'1", if I'm
He,
not
he's
completely
he's big for the
mistaken.
position. I mean,
He's big and yet it feels like he's faster than Ortega sometimes.
no, he is 6 feet tall. Um,
He's
he's 6 feet tall. He, like you said, he's incredibly athletic. Um, I mean, I think he could end up being a player that we could find to be indispensable if he lives up to some of the flashes that we've seen. Um, and I think especially next week as well, I think his build and the play style he brings might lend to the situation because I cannot see Ike coming into this match trying to play us straight up. I think they're going to come in next week and make things as physical and tough and heated as possible because they know they cannot beat us in Karaiskakis playing an open match. So I think you would rather have a guy like Bruno or maybe even Pirola, as weird as it sounds, me being critical of starting him at left back, it might make sense next week because I could see it being a physical affair. So, I mean, I think I would err on the side of starting Bruno. But like you said, potentially you go more conservative. You start Pirola or you start Ortega if he's back up to fitness. We'll see. But next week I think is going to be an interesting match tactically because I don't think it's going to be like any of these other derbies that we played so far. I can't see Ike approaching this like a normal match.
I feel like it will be very similar to how the second leg of the cup was approached, more physical, as you said, counter-attacking approach from them, and a more controlled approach for us. I'm against starting Pirola at left back because I think he's a must at centre back for next week. I do not want to see Carmo starting the game. If Rechos is ready, good. I'd start Pirola and Rechos. If Rechos is not, I start Pirola and Biancon and bring Carmo on at the second half. Bruno is needed not only to cover the position game that we will be forced into, dare I say, but also to cover the pace that Ike has in the wings, because God is Eliasson, for example, a fast fighting player. Uh, so Bruno is a must. And I feel like it's the first time, maybe for as long as we've been watching football, that we can say that even if the starting fullbacks of Olympiacos up and leave, there is backup that can cover them.
Yeah. And I also wonder, if for some reason Bruno isn't ready to start next week, do we consider starting Costinha out left and Rodine on the right? Personally, thinking through it, that might be my choice because both of them are quite quick and quite physical. So, I think there's a couple different ways you can spin it, but it'll be interesting to see. I think next week is probably going to be um, one of the more unique derbies we played this year just because of the situation. And I think Ike will be trying not to lose more than trying to win.
Yeah, because I feel like they're not really having anything about first place in mind, and now know that they are in a three-team scrap for a Champions League ticket. So every point is valuable. And knowing that they have us back to back, as you said, I feel like they'll go for anything they can get. And the second person that I wanted to focus on is a person that I feel like we focused on every football game that we've talked about, and you already know where I'm going with this. That, of course, is Roman Yaremchuk. I feel like, as much as I respected him already, what he did today just skyrocketed that respect, because it's not the first time that he has shown that he loves this club no matter what is happening, but it is one of the main times that he showed it without his football ability, but his pure and utter passion. He shows that he will defend these colors, he will defend this club with whatever means necessary. And honestly, he just proved that those of us who doubted him at the start, including me right here, are very wrong sometimes. And he proved that even if he does leave, because day in, day out, I've openly admitted that I am so torn with what the hell to do with this player. Uh, he's rightfully written his name in the history of this team in such a historic season as well.
He's this year's Vicente Iborra. I mean, he has fought through all of the adversity. Obviously, Mentilibar has shown consistent belief in him, and I think that's also, as much as it's a credit to Roman, it's a credit to Mentilibar again being able to manage so well. I mean, I think that's people talk about managers being able to, be tactically proficient, and I think he's incredible tactically as well. But his ability to get the most out of players and manage players through, you know, tough runs of form or injuries or whatever it is, he's done an exceptional job. And you've seen the guys that do really, really want to play for this club, they succeed under him because he's going to give them the chances and he's going to reward that, even if, you know, looking at them from the score sheet or whatever it is, they might be struggling. So, I mean, I think we should try to keep him for next season. Obviously, the only difficulty I see is the fact that we have Babis Kosulas, we have Ayu Bakabi. You know, it's hard for you to argue for him being prioritized ahead of them, even
You're
as much as
forgetting
we
Betancourt.
Betancur as well. I mean,
That's my issue in keeping him.
I almost wonder if Betancur is going to be more of a 10 or a second striker than an all-out striker. I guess it'll depend on how Mendilibar plays him. The reason I say that is because you look at guys like Kostulas and Jovetic last season, who you would usually consider to be a striker. have actually done better behind a guy like Alkabi or a guy like Yaramchuk in Mendilibar's system. I mean, again, this is all very, theoretical, I guess, hypothetical. Um, but, you know, regardless of what happens with him, like you've said, he's definitely going to be one of those players that's remembered for a long time because of the continuous sacrifices he's made for what's best for the team. To go along with some of his iconic moments this season, whether it's scoring off Dragovski with his error last week, or getting the brace against Boda and giving us a chance. I mean, you can go on and on. He has salvaged what we thought was going to be a really rough and disappointing season, and turned it into um, a big positive.
I mean, he didn't necessarily only give us a chance, but he did give us Champions League football next season as long as we go on and win the league. He gave us a very important goal against Panathinaikos last week. Two very important goals, not one. He did score a brace, didn't he? Or am
Yep.
I mistaken? He did
No,
score a
he
brace.
scored. He scored the third goal as well.
Yeah, yeah. And you can go back as well to the cup game against Panathinaikos with him scoring against Lodikin, which also is the one of the ultimate reasons why we are in the final after 4 years. We have a lost cup final in 21 to
Yep.
Paok.
Yep.
Yeah, after 4 years, which again, our lack of success in the cup in the latter few years is insane to me, but that's a whole different story. And I think it was between him and Danny Garcia for the quote unquote comparisons too with Endemora. But after what came out today, the interview that came out today, I don't know if you did you catch what Bora said?
Mm-mm.
He said that people wanted him to leave the club. He said that I forget who was the Portuguese coach that came in last season. Was it Diego?
Cavaliel.
Diego Carvalhal. Okay, thank you. For the life of me, I forgot his name.
He's
Him
very
and
forgettable.
for all the wrong reason. Him and the technical director that came in, not Cordon, the one before.
I can't remember. I don't know that, but
You know who I'm talking about, that, and
yeah.
everyone else knows who I'm talking about. They wanted to sell him or release him, but he went to. I'm pretty sure he said he went to Karapapas and not Marinakis. I may be paraphrasing, it's one of the two. And he said that he wants to stay at this club, he wants to fight for it, and he wants to be champion with Olympiacos. And that's exactly what he did. And he also said that he was forced to train alone, to train with the people that were on their way out. If you all want to go see the interview, I personally saw it from the boys over at Thrylos 7. They quoted it and I went and saw it, so go see it from them if you want to. But it shows the whole disarray that the club was in last season, honestly. And it shows the adversities that you said both Ibora and now Yaremchuk have fought. While they may be different, they are for sure adversities. And it strengthens the point you said about Mendeleev.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't surprise me to hear all of that. Again, getting back to our point, like it's incredible how much of a 180 this club has done in the past year, and it's why we should all, you know, shut the hell up and be grateful sometimes when we want to be frustrated by a result or a bad run of form. I mean, if you guys would rather go back to that, I mean, be my guest. But personally, I'm way happier with where we are right now. Um, but it just goes to show that you know that's that was a momentary situation where the identity of the club was lost with some of the people who were running it. I think that goes to Marinakis, obviously recognizing that there was a very deep rooted issue, and I think that's why, uh, aside from the form on the pitch as well, that you saw Carvalho, really not stick around very long. Um, Not only was he losing on the pitch, he was losing in the clubhouse as well. Uh, so I think that's another point to be grateful for the fact that if that happened at Ike or if that happened at Panathinaikos, you really think Melisanidis or Alafouzos would have acted swiftly and brought in that change? Absolutely not. I mean, look at Panathinaikos last season with what's his name? I can't even remember the Turkish manager they have. I know when you say it, I'm going to be like, duh. Um,
Yeah, I can't remember either.
I mean
What
that
the hell? Last season has gone by. Not necessarily last season. The first half of last season has gone by in such a blip in my head.
Gunesh, Sheno Gunesh. Was that not it?
No, 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 no way.
Who am I thinking? Anyways, their managerial issues that
We get the point. Yeah, yeah.
cost them the title last season, right? Compared
Terim,
to
Fatih Terim, Fatih
Edim.
Terim, Fatih Terim.
You saw it last season where he came in and messed everything up after Jovanovic, right? And Alafouzos didn't want to hire another manager because that was going to cost him money. Marinakis, obviously, last season, we went through 3 or 4 managers, so we got to the right one. And he acted quickly when he saw these issues arising. So, yeah, I think that it goes back to the fact that you look at us compared to any other team in Greece or most other teams outside of the top 5 or 6 in Europe, top 5 or 6 leagues, we do not have anything to be getting toxic or worked up about because so many positives, even when things are not going perfectly. So I think it's just again, um, stories like that are a testament to how far we've come, and it's a testament to how much we have now, um, from a management or a front office standpoint, anything like that. Olympiacos is taking all of the right steps, and even when we go on a rough run, we lose 2 games in a week where we look horrible in both, you know, it'll be okay. I trust who's in power that it's going to be resolved and rectified, and we'll learn from the lessons. And we'll go on to win the league this season, and we'll all get to laugh about the temper tantrums and toxicity later.
It's honestly what you said. It's a simple phrase that you said. Is that there can always be worse, and there has been worse. Will win a double after 5 years. We're bouncing off our first ever European trophy, our first 2 European trophies, because I love to give credit to the young boys as well. And we're heading to what perhaps maybe our most interesting yet best season yet, with finally also getting Champions League football again, with arguably our best coach of all time at the helm. And God knows where we may go to the fucking quarterfinals of the Champions League with Medellin for all we know. But what I know, at least, is that the future of this club is in safe hands in more ways than one. I think
Absolutely.
that's the best final thoughts I could drop. Wanna finish up on anything else or wanna just close up
No,
for today?
I don't think I could have
Yeah,
said it any better.
we made an hour and 5 minutes out of a shit show of a performance, but Jesus Christ. Uh, we'll see you all soon, probably together next weekend. I'll probably see you within the week for like an announcement or two and the EuroLeague show. And as always, thank you all. See you soon.